This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore.
There is collective panic on the right now after yesterday's ruling by the Federal District Court of Appeals here in Washington, D.C., that ruled that Donald Trump absolutely in no way under any interpretation of statutes or the Constitution does Donald Trump have absolute immunity from prosecution in a criminal case. The right's freaking out. And I want to show you one clip that is kind of emblematic of the freak out, and that is his personal gargoyle, Stephen Miller, who went on with perpetual chronic liar Sean Spicer and freaked out and gave his argument as to why the federal appeals court was wrong and how absolutely Donald Trump has absolute immunity. And now what they can do is bring a case against Joe Biden for what he is actually doing in the course of his job, under the guise of his duties as president, not trying to overturn a free and fair election and overthrow the United States government. Watch human gargoyle taking a break from being perched high atop a Gothic cathedral to give this message to Sean Spicer.
And so people can say, oh, well, you can't prosecute Joe Biden for opening the border because that's not a campaign activity. That's an official activity. Okay, well, what if I find a judge and I find a prosecutor who says he opened the border to help him win re-election, to get more illegal aliens to vote. And he fought election integrity at DHS and DOJ as part of his conspiracy. So that's a RICO violation. That's a civil rights violation, and it's sedition. That's several hundred years in prison for those violations. It doesn't matter if you say to me, oh, I think it's an official act. I'm saying to you, it's not. And I have a judge and a prosecutor who also say it's not. You go to jail, Mayorkas goes to jail, everyone in your administration goes to jail, and your immunity is a worthless piece of...
So why don't we, look, here's my question, and I feel like I love this conversation, but it's so good.
Spicer cut him off because he loves the conversation that's so good. Not because he was rambling like a madman with incoherent legal theories that are not theories in law, but in conspiracy. What if Joe Biden did this to try to get illegal aliens to vote? Which undocumented immigrants are voting in our elections? In the last election, in the election before, or before that, or before that. When is this happening in such a manner and at such levels that it's going to impact the outcome of an election? Joe Biden won the 2020 election by more than 7 million votes. And it's only white supremacist conspiracy theorists on the right who contend that that's because of en masse voting from people who were ineligible to vote. There's no evidence of it because it doesn't exist. It did not happen. But this is the argument they're bringing to bear in court to argue before very serious, sober judges. And this is why they're being rebuffed and rejected at every turn in every court, because the arguments they bring are absolute nonsense. Now, to answer the question as to why they're freaking out, why they're making such a fuss right now, it is because of the timeline of Donald Trump's cases, especially the election interference case, that is now on a rocket ship to trial. Before, it was kind of in limbo, like Judge Chutkan had kind of indefinitely suspended and postponed until we had a decision from the Federal Appeals Court. Now, it's very likely Donald Trump's on a real tight leash here to appeal before the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court's going to decide whether to either take up the case and weigh it on its merits, or refuse to take the case, thereby allowing the lower court's decision to stand. Here's Ryan Goodman on CNN just yesterday talking about that accelerated timeline. And this is the reason that MAGA world and these nuts are now losing it. Watch this.
All right, so Ryan Goodman's here with me, co-editor-in-chief of Just Security. And Ankush Kadori, the former federal prosecutor who wrote an article in New York Magazine titled, "What Happens Exactly If Trump is Sentenced to Prison?" So, Ryan, listening to Ty talking about the argument here that was given by the judges today, the three judges, your team looked at the potential timeline now that we have this ruling on immunity. And here it comes on this Tuesday in February. What does this mean in terms of whether Trump's case itself, that this particular trial on January 6th concludes before Election Day?
So there's now a pretty good likelihood it will conclude before Election Day. We'll have a verdict. And the court sets this up in motion by saying that by Monday, February 12th, Trump has to basically petition the Supreme Court. They force his hand. And then the court gets to decide whether or not they want to take cert or hear the case. Mm-hmm. And they'll probably make that decision around Leap Day, February 29th.
Right.
At that point, you got two different tracks. So track one is the court decides not to take the case. They just deny cert. They say what Ty Cobb just said.
Ty's saying it's not worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth it. This is a solid decision. It's a landmark decision. It's narrow. It's confined. And it is a unanimous decision. So we just leave it be. If that's the case, then we're on a short track. It goes right back to the trial court. June 1st is a very good start date to anticipate, and then the trial wraps up by September 1st. That's the short time frame. Then the longer time frame is the court does hear the case, but they will decide against Trump in all likelihood. He just doesn't really have a strong case. On that timeline, then we're looking at late July, like July 30th start date, October 30th verdict. And that's conservative. It could be like a week before October 30th, but obviously bumping right up against.
Right. I mean, October 30th is obviously the week before the election.
So that puts us right before the election. Even if the Supreme Court decides to take up the case and decides it on its merits and doesn't just default to the lower court ruling, we're still looking like a very likely conclusion to this, a verdict in this case, before the election. And that has Trump fans, Trump surrogates, and Trump himself in a panic, sweating, worrying, fretting over the very real specter of jail time for the ex-president, current and former criminal. What do you think? As always, I would love to know what you think. 714-576-4054. Of course, you can email me, as always, daily at dollemore.com. I would appreciate your support in helping produce this content if you are in a position to do so. Click the join button below. For $2 a month, you can become a channel member. Hit the super thanks button. Go over to my Patreon page, patreon.com/IDoubtIt podcast. All those are great ways. You can also follow me on social media. I'm at Dollemore on Twitter and Instagram and Threads and TikTok and Facebook and Blue Sky. Also, yesterday I posted a video, had a conversation with a gentleman named Donald Sherman. Donald K. Sherman. He is the Executive Vice President and Chief Counsel for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. We had a fantastic conversation about the Supreme Court case to remove him from the ballot. And he's involved in that case, representing clients before the Supreme Court. And it is worth your time. There will be a link in the description below to watch that. And if you have any questions, maybe we'll have him back on and answer some of the unanswered things that I didn't get to. I'll see you next time. Until I do, be genuine. Take care, one another.